England and Scotland have played each other 116 times. In this series, we start with the first game and look at each game one by one, year by year. We'll look at, amongst other things, the players, the venues, the history, football and changes, and the quirky stories. I'm Steve. Join me on this journey to discover what makes England v Scotland the greatest international derby. Hi and welcome back. So, what was happening in the world in 1882? It was a massive step forward for women's rights and indeed common sense, with on the 18th of August came the Married Women's Property Act. It enabled women to buy, own and sell property and to keep their own earnings. Before this, for any married woman, everything she possessed essentially belonged to her husband to do with as he pleased, and many a young woman's fortune was ruined by their husband's vices. This is the year author Oscar Wilde arrives in the United States for a lecture tour, and when asked by the customs official if he has anything to declare, he replies, "I have nothing to declare but my genius." And finally, an animal whose name has entered into people's vocabulary. This is the year that Jumbo the elephant is sold by London Zoo to P.T. Barnum's travelling circus. In New York, Barnum exhibited Jumbo at Madison Square Gardens, earning enough in 3 weeks from the enormous crowds to recoup the money he spent to buy the animal. And in a 31-week season, the circus earned $1.75 million, mainly due to its star attraction. On May the 17th, 1884, Jumbo was one of Barnum's 21 elephants that crossed the Brooklyn Bridge to demonstrate that it was safe, and his name became common parlance for something very large. Born this year is Alan Alexander Milne, or as the world knows him, A. Milne, author of Winnie the Pooh. And also born this year is Edward Hopper, an American painter whose most famous work, Nighthawks, is my favourite painting ever. Deaths would see Charles Darwin, whose theory of evolution had shocked society. Clubs founded this year include Queen's Park Rangers, Burnley, and Tottenham Hotspur. Indeed, Spurs were yet another team formed from a cricket team, and they were originally called Hotspur FC, but changed their name in 1884 as another team in London called Hotspur were having their mail delivered to the North London team. There are many wonderful suffixes to British clubs, but one that never quite made it to fruition was dynamite. Reported in Bell's Life in 1882, it screamed, "What's next in football?" We noticed a match that has been played and won by a club called Dynamite. The club in question were from the small Ayrshire town of Ardeer, and the club consisted of workers of the Ardeer Dynamite Company. I'm also happy to report there was no reports of their fans taking flares to any of the games. In the Scottish Cup this year, it's the second year in a row where Queen's Park would beat Dumbarton in a replay. A 2-2 draw in the first game, with Queen's Park winning 4-1 in the replay. In the FA Cup, we see Old Etonians beating Blackburn Rovers 1-0, with Rovers playing in their first, but certainly not last, cup final. And on the cup front, one player playing in today's international game was a prolific goalscorer. In 140 years of the FA Cup, no one has scored more goals than Henry Kersham, also known as Harry. He was a Notts County striker of the 1870s and 80s, although Kersham is credited with 49 strikes in total. He was never an FA Cup winner at Meadow Lane, as he did not play in the Magpies' win of 1891. Kersham could play on either side of the pitch, and his eye for goal continued onto the international arena, playing 8 times for England between 1882 and 84, scoring 5 goals. And sporty old Kersham also played 2 first-class cricket matches for Nottinghamshire. Kersham was an advocate for and an exponent of dribbling the ball. He was critical of the emphasis on passing tactics that emerged in the combination game, which became popular in the 70s and 80s. In 1904, he gave an interview to the Football Post in which he stated that individual play was being too greatly sacrificed to the cry of combination play. Good job he wasn't a member of Pep Guardiola's team. On the international front, this is the year Ireland play their first international friendly on the 18th of February 1882, and it's against England, and they lost 13-0 in Belfast. Still, their record defeat and England's biggest win. But England were to face tougher opponents a month later, on the 11th of March, when they would face Scotland at Hampden in front of 12,000 expectant fans. Could they also rain in goals against their old rivals? Let's find out. The referee was John Wallace, with umpires Thomas Anderson and Segar Richard Bastard, who had played against Scotland in 1880. This was a game that saw an experimental law that empowered the referee to award a goal in cases where, in his opinion, a goal was being prevented from a deliberate handball by the defending team. I'm thinking of Luis Suarez in the World Cup. The law only lasts 1 season. Scotland have adopted a new jersey, the blue and white stripes of the Edinburgh Academicals, with the Scottish lion worked in gold as a badge, and they line up 226. George Gillespie, goalkeeper, Rangers FC. Andrew Watson, right back, Queen's Park FC. Andrew McIntyre, left back, Vale of Leven FC. Charles Campbell, half back, Queen's Park FC. Peter Miller, half back, Dumbarton FC. Malcolm John Edie Fraser, outside right, Queen's Park FC. William Anderson, inside right, Queen's Park FC. George Kerr, centre forward, Queen's Park FC. William Harrower, centre forward, Queen's Park FC. John Lech Kay, inside left, Queen's Park FC. And Robert McPherson, outside left, Arthurlie FC. England dressed in white jerseys and blue knickerbockers, and they also lined up in a 2-2-6. In their team, H. Albemarle Swipstone, goalkeeper, Pilgrims FC and Corinthians FC. Dr. H. Greenwood, right back, Blackburn Rovers FC. Alfred Jones, left back, Walsall Swifts FC. Norman C. Bailey, half back, Clapham Rovers FC. John Hunter, half back, Healy FC, Providence FC, Wednesday FC, and Sheffield Albion FC. Henry A. Kersham, outside right, Notts County FC and Corinthians FC. Edward H. Parry, inside right, Old Carthusians AFC, Swifts FC, Remembrance FC, O. Howard Vaughan, centre forward, Aston Villa FC, Arthur Brown, centre forward, Aston Villa FC, E. Charles Bainbridge, inside left, Swifts FC, and becoming the most capped English player, William Mossford, outside left, Wednesday FC, with 8 appearances. And the match report comes from the Morning Post, Monday the 13th of March, 1882. The annual match, under association rules between England and Scotland, was played on Saturday afternoon at Hampden Park, Glasgow, in the presence of about 12,000 spectators. The weather was fine, and the ground in good condition. Scotland were successful in the toss, and at first elected to play with the wind in their favour. The home team speedily invaded their rivals' territory and made repeated attacks on their goal, which for some time was saved by the dexterity of Swepstone. Good runs were made by Parry and Kersham, but were stopped by the Scottish backs. Bailey also ran the ball well down the ground, but took his kick too hurriedly, and it went over the crossbar. Once more, the home forwards acted on the aggressive, and a corner kick seemed to imperil their fortress, but Swepstone proved equal to the occasion. At length, however, there was some determined play in front of the English posts, and out of a loose scrimmage, the ball was shot through by Harrower. Very clever runs were made by Kersham and Bainbridge down the centre of the ground, but the ball, being well passed from one to the other with great skill, Mossford also made a fine attempt to score and shot the ball into the hands of the goalkeeper, who threw it well away. He returned to the charge, and this time succeeded in sending the ball between the posts. The score having thus been brought level, the play became even more determined. A little before the time arrived for changing ends, Kerr placed a second goal to the credit of Scotland. And the sides having crossed over, the home team had the wind against them, but this did not prevent Harrower from immediately kicking a third goal, and the game had not proceeded much further before Kerr added a fourth. And within 5 minutes of the cessation of the hostilities, Kay sent the ball through. This was the last score, and thus, when time was called, victory rested with the Scotch by 5-1. Scotland were certainly the most dominant team in this early stage of the rivalry. Next year, we return to England and a new stadium when we go to the Yorkshire Cricket Ground at Bramall Lane in Sheffield. Could England get their revenge? Join me next time. I hope you're enjoying these. If you have, don't forget to leave a review, write in the comments, and subscribe. You could also send a link to your friends. It would be very much appreciated. But until then, bye bye.